Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's philosophical exploration. Um, in this latest installment of our philosophical exploration, we're going to be talking about the meaning of Christmas. Christmas just recently passed, and so that the Christmas period has offered us an opportunity to reflect on Christmas and its importance to our lives and the meaning of Christmas. And so what I wanted to do in this conversation that we're going to have is just to go over our thoughts on what we think the meaning of Christmas is. And I wanted to get into talking about this by considering a literary example. And I think one that comes to mind for helping to at least clarify my own ideas about what the meaning of Christmas is for me is Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, which many people listening are acquainted with. If you grew up in a Christian household or a Christian culture, it's hard not to have been exposed to the Christmas Carol, and as it was told by Charles Dickens, and as it's been portrayed, in various movie renditions and so on. And so I'll be referencing that quite often and discussing my own ideas of what I think the meaning of Christmas is, because it tends to resonate with my own values and my own outlook about what the meaning of Christmas is for me. So just to begin with, at the outset, I think the meaning of Christmas for me, to a large extent, is ethical in nature, insofar as I'm trying to understand what Christmas means philosophically, in a philosophical sense. And a question I wanted to pose right at the outset here is when we think of Christmas, when we think of it as Christmas as having an ethical philosophy that goes with it, what ideas come to mind? And I think about this in somewhat of Aristotelian terms, or in terms of the moral framework that comes out of the ancient Greek philosophers, which basically understood the ethical the ethical significance of one life relating to eudaimonia and hedonia, right? Which can be understood in more everyday terms as self-actualization. That would correspond more to the eudaimonia, and hedonia as corresponding to our life satisfaction. So I think in part, the meaning of Christmas in some sense is, for me, it lends itself to the achievement of our eudaimonic well-being, in the sense of it gives us an opportunity to live and do well, and it gives us an opportunity to act on our true values and to actualize our potential as human beings. And I'm specifically thinking in terms of actualizing our virtues as human beings. And I guess there's certain typical virtues we associate with Christmas. One that comes to mind is benevolence, which is just the quality of being well-meaning and kind to others. And so I think we all have potential to be benevolent. I think my concept of human nature is that human beings are good at heart. And I don't think that this concept we've carried with us, maybe in our collective psyche, that man or humanity is sinful by nature, right? This idea of original sin. And but I don't think that's borne out by my experience, and that's not borne out by the experience of many other people. And so I think Christmas affords the opportunity of realizing that higher nature within us, that benevolent nature within us. And so, that's a good, I think Christmas has a lot to do with that. And so I'll just pause there. I'm curious what your take on all of this is. Ryan, this question of when we think of Christmas and the ethical philosophy that goes with Christmas, what comes to mind with you? What does any of that mesh with your own thinking, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I phrase it slightly differently, but it seems to be getting at the same sort of concept or idea. For me, when I think about Christmas and I think about sort of the ethical nature of it, I think of sort of my idea of how to live well and how to get the most out of life, and like what I want out of life from in like a higher sense, not sort of material goods or anything, and for me it's about genuinely caring about other people and sort of what their needs and their desires are in life. And I think in order for us to live sort of our best lives and to get what we truly want out of life, we have to genuinely care about others. We have to genuinely care about what they want. Right. We can't sort of live this sort of radical sort of selfish away that you would expect out of a character like Scrooge. You're not going to get what you want fully. You're not going to be truly satisfied with life living like that. And I think Christmas is a good holiday to kind of put that into practice. Put into practice, compassion and benevolence, as you've sort of outlined here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I can definitely sympathize with those views too. I think as you said, I think Christmas provides an opportunity to be benevolent to others, and in some sense, being benevolent to others is part of living a fulfilling life. We can't just be totally self-regarding beings. That I think we're very social by nature, and that our well-being is bound up with the well-being of our fellow human beings. We're all in this together to some degree, and so I think Christmas for me provides a context for embodying that virtue, and I think it's very interesting how Christmas can influence you and I that way. What is it about this part of this season that affects us in this way? That's something that I'd like to pursue maybe a bit more deeply as we go along. So maybe we can continue to roll on, because we're just scratching the surface here, and there's many layers of the onion in which we can delve down into here. So getting back on this topic of virtue, of self-actualization, of actualizing our virtues as human beings, and that being part of the good life, being part of living a happy life. I think one theme to maybe reflect on is this idea of cultivating what I've called the Christmas virtues, but these are virtues of benevolence and compassion, and I think they are embodied and represented by various virtuous models, if you want to call it that, like Christ or Saint Francis or the reformed Scrooge at the end of the Christmas Carol, who's suddenly become a benevolent being. And I think part of the Christmas holidays is being exposed to these models. You know, even if they're just archetypes in our own minds, they kind of represent the ideal. You know, the ideal we want to aim at, because to some degree they possess these qualities almost at the same level of a deity. You know, it's almost as if their benevolence is not ordinary benevolence, but it's like an omnibenevolence. You know, it's you know, they're completely and totally benevolent. And so Christ, Saint Francis, the reformed Scrooge, these are all models that when I think of these figures, even if they're just fictional, I can't help but be affected in some way. If I meditate upon them, you know, it almost elevates my own ethical consciousness and wants and you know, kind of it motivates me to embody these virtues myself. So that's one thing that comes to mind when I think of the eudaimonic part of Christmas, is this idea of cultivating these Christmas virtues, and through these various influences, through these models, also through the persuasory influence of other people. You know, so we can talk to people and they can use rational arguments, or they can use rhetoric to kind of convince us as to why we should be good to others as well. Maybe it was our parents or friends or whomever. If we went to church, maybe it was our pastor or whomever. So that's one side of the coin here, as far as thinking about the ethical nature of Christmas. The other side of the coin that I'd like to talk about a little bit is this idea that Christmas provides us with an opportunity to achieve hedonic well-being. So this is the part of our well-being which focuses on achieving happiness, positive emotions, having pleasurable experiences, and so on. And so I think that's another key component of Christmas and its significance, for me at least. And so to tie all these ideas together, we've talked about so far, this, you know, eudaimonic well-being, hedonic well-being, both of these concepts of well-being, I think they weave nicely into this literary example that I wanted to talk about a little bit, which is Dickens' Christmas Carol, which I think provides I'd say a fairly apt representation of the meaning of Christmas as far as I'm concerned, from my point of view. And it encapsulates these ideas of how Christmas can be conducive to, you know, the achievement of well-being in that broad sense of both eudaimonia and hedonia. And I had a good quote here, I think, that kind of sums the meaning of Christmas up fairly succinctly. It comes from the Christmas Carol, and it comes from Fred, who is Scrooge's merry nephew. And I'll just briefly go over it, and we can then mull this over and talk about it and what we think of it. So he states it this way. Christmas is a kind, forgiving, charitable, and pleasant time. It's the only time I know of in the long calendar year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they really were fellow passengers to the grave, and not just another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, uncle, and uncle, he's referring to Uncle Scrooge, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good, and it will do me good. And I say, God bless it. So that's a fairly dense couple sentences there. But I think it summarizes to some extent a lot of what we've already been talking about. How Christmas is a time where that provides us with an opportunity to develop our charitable qualities, to have a pleasant time, to be open, and receptive to other people, to be open and receptive to giving to other people. And by doing such things, we're doing ourselves a service. We're nurturing our own virtue, our own eudaimonic well-being, our own hedonic well-being. These are all good things from me, from my point of view. So I don't know, Ryan, if that those few sentences, whether that captured similar sentiments for you. Do you agree with that account of the meaning of Christmas, if we want to call it that?
Yeah, I particularly resonate, or the part that resonates with me is it says, is a part of the calendar year when men and women, open their shut up hearts freely and think of other people as fellow passengers. So kind of recognizing kind of what I was saying before, that other people have certain needs and desires that, they may be the same as yours, it may be different, but genuinely caring about them as, other people, that are worthy to be cared about, and to actually consider what they want, and to maybe, donate, or to just share, a good time with them, whatever it is, just being able to respect other people and to treat them as human beings. Because especially nowadays, I find everyone's just on their own, path. Like, I'm sure, you just came back from Toronto, those big sort of big city mentality, no one looks at each other. Everyone's just kind of, but it gives us time to pause and really look at one another and share things, whether that's a moment or gifts or charity or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good insight. I think that's something we can maybe highlight, because I think what it points to some degree is that Christmas is a time where we can be particularly mindful of the fact that we are all just in this all together. We're one big human tribe, and we're not fundamentally, when you look beneath social class, when you look beneath skin color, when you look beneath all of these surface differences, I think to some degree we're all part of that fundamental, human spirit, or if you want to say, we're all part of this one human nature we all share in, and in the end, when you look at across cultures, across races, across ethnicities, there are all these universals that are all pervading, and I think this kind of gets back to something I said previously, but I think all human beings by their very nature are good at heart, and I think that it's it's the tragedy of human experience often that our benevolent natures are corrupted through various influences, maybe through upbringing, through not receiving the care we needed at critical periods of our development, and so on. But
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think too, a lot of us, we all got bills to pay and things to take care of. So a lot of the year, I think a lot of us are very, maybe selfish isn't the right word, but we're kind of focused on looking after ourselves and looking after our own needs for the most part. And yeah, Christmas is that time where we can like take that pause and really, maybe have a little bit of an adjustment, or take a moment to be less selfish or self-centered, and give to others, spend time with others, things that we maybe don't have time to do the rest of the year because we're busy working. Like I said, just trying to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. No, I think that's sounds like a fairly accurate analysis. I think I know in my own case, being a student, my singular focus from September to the beginning of December, up until the period where I get off of my Christmas break is, how am I going to score high on my assignments and my exams so I can get ahead? And I'm thinking very, very instrumentally all the time,
Yeah.
What's the best means to these desired ends in mind, and, helping others maybe who are poor or unfortunate, or maybe just need a hug or something, someone who just needs someone to talk to because they're having a stressful day or something. I often feel like I can get absorbed in my own work, my own what would you say?
Your own goals, really. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, my own goals too, right? So, I feel like when I transition to the holidays, when I get off school, when I go home, when I go visit friends and family, it's that change of context, and to some extent, I think that kind of shifts my focus, it shifts my attention, it shifts my consciousness upon these other things of being a more benevolent person, reaching out and helping others, and so I think that's pretty accurate, by my own understanding. So just to continue on along here, because I know we have lots of material to dig into here. Getting back to this question of ethics and the ethical meaning of Christmas, I think for me, the meaning of Christmas is largely ethical, in my opinion. We can maybe think about it now in terms of ethical responsibilities we might have. What we might ask, what are the ethical responsibilities of the philosopher who upholds the principles of Christmas? And for me, in my own view here is, to the extent that we're going to be ethical human beings during Christmas time, what does that mean? Well, I think to some degree it means supporting eudaimonic well-being. And so that's promoting the growth of what I call the Christmas virtues. So benevolence, forgiveness, maybe we could throw compassion in there too. So it involves the promotion of these things. Well, how do we promote these things? Well, we can model these virtues. If we ourselves are benevolent or compassionate, we can model these virtues. We can behave benevolently to others. Then hopefully others who we come into association with will see our example, and they will internalize it, and they will embody it. And we might also use persuasory influence. We might, if we notice someone like a Scrooge is selfish, self-absorbed, miserly, not giving, we might say, hey, you're missing the point of Christmas, meaning of it. I don't think you're acting in a manner that is conducive to your own well-being or the well-being of others. So, and I can cite various examples, maybe offer some evidence in support of that position, and then maybe through reason, persuade that person, or use rhetoric and operate on their emotions, because we're not just logically minded beings, but we're, as William James says, right, we're passional beings. We're not just rational beings, we're passional beings. And so maybe we can appeal to somebody's passions. Like Hume says, what was it? Reason is and ought to be the slave of the passions. Isn't that what he said?
Yes, yeah, I believe so. Yeah, I think all this can be summed up too by a common phrase you hear around this time of year, which is, spreading the Christmas spirit.
Yeah.
Right. So this idea of supporting eudaimonic well-being, I think, could really sort of almost be equated with that phrase. How do we do that? Well, we spread the Christmas spirit. Whether that's through modeling or through some other way of influencing somebody. But it's generally giving to someone or modeling. You see that a lot in religious circles. They do like a lot of charity work and fundraisers and all sorts of events, whether it's taking care of homeless or charity donation drives, things like that.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think that's a good phrase, spreading the Christmas spirit. I think that captures it nicely. I think we are spreading a spirit to some degree, and we can return to this topic of spirit as we go along. But the spirit that we're spreading, what are we spreading? Well, maybe we are spreading a spirit. Maybe there is the Christmas spirit is maybe part of our collective psyche, our collective unconscious, and it's always with us, but especially at that time of the year. And whatever that Christmas spirit is, we're spreading it. We're, to the extent that we're maybe conduits to it, we're spreading it. Through our benevolent actions, through our being compassionate, through charity work, through gift giving during Christmas Day under the tree with our family. So yeah, well put. And to continue on with this thread, we have supporting well-being as maybe one of our moral responsibilities as philosophers of Christmas, but we also have as another responsibility this we're tasked with supporting the hedonic well-being of others as well. And what does that mean? Well, for me, it involves inducing good feelings within our fellow human beings through our benevolent actions to some degree. Making other people feel good, spreading the love, spreading the good vibes, through mirth and cheer, maybe having a couple rum and eggnogs with your good friend by the Christmas tree while you reminisce about, Christmases of bygone years, and then maybe getting on the sleds and having a fun time in the backyard, going down the hill and all that good stuff. Simple things, but things which are memorable, which boost our serotonin, which just make us feel good, and get us into that mood, and help to dampen down those negative things that in that rumination we often get swept up in, when we're not in that atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And
so I just sum it up to presents and pie.
Presents and pie. Yeah. Right. All just sensory rewards, right?
Yeah.
Ramp up the dopamine and leave us feeling pretty good. So yeah, I mean, how do we achieve that bliss, that state of pleasure? Just through our own actions, through making people feel better, feeling good, saying and doing good things, with a sense of urgency, without wasting time. And I think to cite the literary example again of Dickens' A Christmas Carol, it's whenever I read it, I'm always inspired to go out and comfort somebody, maybe give them some money, give them some food if they're in need, especially. And one example that comes to mind is an example from a good friend. Him and his wife, what they do, they have this tradition of walking down Queen Street, which is one of the major streets in downtown Toronto, and they go to McDonald's and they get a bag of cheeseburgers, and they just walk down Queen Street, and they just hand out cheeseburgers to the poor, to the needy. And for him, he says, it gives him this profound sense of feeling good about what he's doing. And maybe that it's because he is, giving rise to a corresponding feeling in the people that he's helping. And, that's getting back to both eudaimonia and hedonia, because in some sense, you're actualizing this virtue of benevolence, but you're also helping to induce these pleasurable feelings, not only within yourself, but with the person you're helping. So I think that's a fitting example. What do you think about all of that, Brian, about supporting the hedonic well-being?
Yeah, I think even, I think that the example that you gave of your friends there is a really good one. It's something, relatively small. It's a nice small gesture, but it makes a big difference to those people, right? Especially from a stranger. I find, say like a family member buys you a cheeseburger, it's like, okay. But when, a random stranger that you don't even know does something small for you, especially at that time of year, it really means a lot. And I think too that we as people, I think you even touched on this, it gives us ourselves the sort of slice of hedonia, like we feel good about ourselves doing that, and there's kind of no way around that. Like, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it's good to feel good about giving to others. I don't think, maybe don't go around posting it on social media. I think that maybe, looking for too much hedonia from what you're doing, like getting kudos from other people. I'm sure your friends aren't looking for kudos from people, but it's good enough just to feel good about it yourself.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think that's pretty significant in my opinion, the fact that our own feeling good about ourselves, is inextricably bound up with, another person feeling that way about themselves as well. There's an interdependence there, which I find that is pretty interesting. I think that underscores our social nature as human beings, that there's this reciprocity between everybody, and it would seem, especially at Christmas time, that there's this reciprocity, this giving and receiving seems to be particularly profound, and I think it's a good thing. I think it's one of the ways that Christmas maybe brings out the best in us. Just to continue along this thread, getting to this topic of benevolence to the poor that we've been talking about. The philosopher, insofar as he embodies the Christmas spirit, he's inspired to be benevolent to those that are less fortunate. I think that's one of the key virtues that manifests itself at Christmas. And getting back to this notion of Christmas spirit, embodying the Christmas spirit, I think Christmas spirit might be the right word to use here. And it's a word that resonates with another word that we've brought up in our discussions, this idea of a daimon, which is just this lesser deity or guardian spirit. And this is what might inspire us to do these good deeds. This is something I want to return to, but we think of, if we were going to think of like a literary example, like Dickens' Christmas Carol, there's various figures in that novella who represent a daemon or a Christmas spirit. So we have Jacob Marley, we have the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and yet to come. We also have other figures in popular culture from the Disney movies like Jiminy Cricket. So these are all figures that kind of represent this ethical consciousness, or that seem to help to inspire us to be more ethical, inspire us to realize that higher ethical nature within us. So that's one interesting topic that I just wanted to put out there, just to introduce it. We can return to it. This other question I want to talk about is this question of, are the ethical behaviors that we've been talking about, developing these Christmas virtues, benevolence and compassion, and promoting good feelings in others and within ourselves, are these ethical behaviors, are these in some sense seasonal? That's one question I wanted to ask. And I want to think something along the lines like Christmas provides a context in which these behaviors seem to be able to manifest themselves better than they typically do throughout the rest of the year. But I also think that we can behave this way all the time throughout the year. They're not necessarily seasonal, and that the Christmas spirit, maybe just in some degrees, in some respects, can pervade the entire year if we keep that spirit with us. That's my own thinking on this. Curious as to what you might think about this idea of the Christmas being seasonal or not seasonal.
I think I agree with you for the most part. Like when I think about the Christmas spirit or whatever, I do think that people do show it more at this time of year, whether that's simply for cultural reasons. I'm not sure, but I think it does come at a time where people need it most. Christmas and winter traditionally and historically has been sort of like a hard time for people. The weather's harsh, the days are short, and I think it is a good time to focus that spirit on. So whether or not you show it all year round or you don't, I think there's a way in which this time of year it provides a context for those sort of virtues to be heightened or concentrated. Maybe you don't show it the rest of the year, but at least at this time of year, it kind of gives you a reminder. So I don't think they have to be seasonal, very much like you just said there. But I think if they are seasonal, I'm glad it comes at this time of year, because I think it's the time of year where everyone can use it the most.
Right. Yeah. That's a good reflection. I mean, I can kind of agree with that too, to some degree. I feel like Christmas offers me some respite. When I'm finishing off a year, often it's an escape from the toil of work, and it's a time of renewal, time of regeneration, a time of getting back in touch with what it's all about, the larger existential meanings of life and why are we here, and Christmas provides itself with for me at least, provides me with a moral compass, provides me with a vision of maybe deeper meanings than just, my day-to-day existence of me trying to get ahead in life and make the grade and get the credentials I need to get a good job and make lots of money. And, it reminds me that all of these things that I'm doing are in the interest of something larger. What is my money good for other than, the well-being that I can promote in my own life and the life of other people, and so I mean, I agree in large part, and I think that the Christmas spirit and the ethical behaviors that the Christmas spirit might inspire though they might be perennial, not just seasonal, it seems like Christmas, the Christmas at that particular time of the year seems to be a period where that awareness is strengthened, is heightened, and so that's an interesting phenomenon. I'd like to think a little more and reflect on that, and maybe come back to this maybe at a future point. But yeah, it's as if our collective psyche all at this time of the year was strengthened in regard to becoming more in tune with this Christmas spirit or something like that. In any case, I'll just leave it at that for now. So shifting now to another topic that I wanted to talk about. This is this question of the extent to which Christmas can influence our ethical being and lead to positive self-transformation. And in my own view, I think Christmas and the holidays more generally is a time where this tradition can, these holiday traditions can influence our well-being and to transform ourselves and the quality of our life. And I think returning back to the literary example of Christmas Carol and the character of Scrooge, well, Scrooge undergoes a personal transformation, which I think illustrates this point. And in my view, he serves as an archetype that might be generalized to other people's experiences over the holidays as well. And to that degree, I think that the personal meaning I get out of this story of how Christmas lends itself to self-transformation could be something, that's not strictly personal, but it's also universal. It could extend to other people's experiences as well. And so what do I mean by Scrooge being this archetype of self-transformation? Well, it's somewhat of a complex concept, but in one sense, Scrooge serves as a typical example of a certain type of person, maybe a selfish person, a materialistic person. In another sense, he might serve as an archetype in more of like a Jungian sense of him being kind of a primitive mental image inherited from our earliest ancestors and supposed to be present in our collective unconscious. So, Scrooge might just be a manifestation of a more general archetype of somebody who's more selfish, materialistic, malicious, so on and so forth. We can maybe go look back in our history, through literary examples, through historical examples of actual historical figures who've existed, and so on and so forth. All of these figures representing this same archetype that's just woven into our collective psyche, our a priori, way of perceiving the world. And so Scrooge might be, a representation of that archetype. And he also might just be a recurrent symbol or a motif that we see in literature and in art or in mythology. I guess all of these definitions of archetype are somewhat similar. There's somewhat overlap in all of them. So I think, getting to the gist of what I want to say here is that Scrooge might be viewed as an archetype of the selfish self, of somebody who undergoes a archetypal transformation into a more benevolent self. And I think that literary representation might be also a good representation of the transformation that the holiday season helps to catalyze within us as well. And so that's something I want to maybe dwell on a little bit. And getting back to our literary example of Scrooge, just to further characterize and provide some more detail as to what this selfish character looks like The way that Dickens describes Scrooge is as follows. He describes him as a tight-fisted, hand at the grindstone, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as a flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. And then to continue, this is an example of how Scrooge has this tendency to exhibit this zestful malice. And it's clear in the beginnings of the story that's as Scrooge howls at his nephew Fred, he says, if I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holly through his heart. He should. And so, these descriptions of Scrooge, I think, paint in fairly vivid detail, this archetype of this selfish self, and the way that this particular archetype sees the world, and which is inherently selfish and antisocial and malicious as well. So anybody familiar with the story, of course, knows that this is not how Scrooge stays, of course, as he develops throughout the novella. Various supernatural and natural influences affect Scrooge through his mind and his heart as well, and he's transformed from a selfish man to a more selfless and compassionate man. And through encountering the supernatural, the three spirits, his ethical consciousness and his nature is fundamentally altered. And it also seems that not only the supernatural, but natural influences, such as states of consciousness, perhaps in combination with other influences as well, are able to shape his ethical nature. And so I'd like to examine, to some extent, how the supernatural and natural influences might play a role in such a transformation, either in Scrooge or just in everyday people. And so what I wanted to focus on now, sort of to further elaborate on this topic, is the influence of the supernatural upon the ethical, and particularly the role that the spirits play in shaping Scrooge's ethical character, or more generally, the extent at which supernatural influences play a role in shaping our ethical characters. And so, just to briefly define what supernatural is, it's a manifestation or an event that is attributed to some force beyond scientific understanding, or the laws of nature, or the habits of nature, or whatever way you want to describe it. And something that's supernatural is something that's extraordinarily great. That's also an alternative meaning as well. So the question I wanted to ask at this point is, to what extent do supernatural forces shape our ethical character during Christmas? And one might argue that one's ethical development and transformation over the holidays is crucially influenced by the supernatural. At least it seems to be that way in Dickens' A Christmas Carol. And if you are religious, whether in a organized sense or whether in more of a non-organized or non-institutional sense, you might believe there is a supernatural force influencing our minds and our hearts and our behavior, and that's what might be held responsible for these changes. So I just wanted to throw that question out there. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Ryan. Do you think there are supernatural forces shaping our behavior, shaping our ethical characters?
I mean, maybe perhaps in the extraordinarily great category. I'm not sure I'm a believer of, spirits and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think, especially growing up, I think these things can shape our behavior, and even later on in life, especially if you're, I think you can imagine, say you're like down and out on your luck. I know a lot of people this time of year, they go through hard times. Um, some people lose their homes in fires, all sorts of stuff. I know in our province, we've been still dealing with a lot of the sort of consequences of natural disasters, a lot of terrible, terrible weather out here. And I'm sure these sort of experiences that people have had through people's generosity and things like that have changed some lives and perhaps outlooks on life. Obviously not all of them, but I think that it's these sort of, these extraordinary experiences can really have an impact on us.
Right. Interesting. So it's an interesting way of interpreting the question. I mean, how something that is extraordinary that we encounter, like a flood or a natural disaster, how these extraordinary events can impact the way we behave ethically to other people.
It's more or less to like people's response to it. So like, you lose a house or something in a flood, and all of these people from, around the country or the world, kind of rush to provide aid and things like that, something you'd never necessarily expect from people you don't know. I think that, those sort of examples can really, change somebody's life and their outlook. So moving forward, they might be more giving, more understanding of other people and their circumstances, and sort of maybe embody that spirit a bit more.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good way of interpreting this question. If we just wanted to interpret it strictly at the supernatural, strictly as, maybe something that is natural in an extraordinary way, like a natural disaster, and how that evokes the best qualities within us. Alternatively, we could conceptualize it more in more classically supernatural terms, insofar as the supernatural is a manifestation of something that is beyond our ability to explain scientifically. A spirit, for example, hypothetically, could a spirit, if a spirit did exist, could a spirit influence us in such a way as to make us more benevolent, more charitable? Often, you hear people talk in ways like, they were filled with, they were filled with a force which seemed like it was greater than themselves, whether that, be love or benevolence or charity to someone else. And that something greater than themselves seems to be, often people attribute that to being something beyond them, maybe something of divine influence.
The other way I was thinking of this was sort of, a collective consciousness. Like, it's sort of that, the thing you get filled with when you're around a bunch of people around Christmas time. Like, it's this sort of almost out of body experience where you're sharing in a collective moment. Like, I think of almost how it would feel like downtown, at Christmas time in like New York City or something like that.
Right.
Just seeing everything going on, and just like it's just something that sort of like overtakes you. It's something that's beyond yourself that you're sort of just taking part of, and how that can kind of, influence you and kind of take over.
Right.
But for me, it's more of like a natural. You can have more of a natural psychological explanation for these things, but in a way, it does kind of feel supernatural.
Right. Right. So I guess it really depends on how we're defining supernatural in this case. I mean, I think that's a good example, though, of how we can often be overtaken by a collective mood or something like that. And being downtown New York during the holidays seems to be a prime example. I'm thinking the image that comes to mind is being down in Times Square during the ushering in of the new year.
That was my other thought too. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you don't necessarily need to be limited to Christmas per se in this conversation of the meaning of Christmas, because this is not just the meaning of Christmas, but the holidays more generally, which includes the new year. So we can talk about the new year as well. Um, but I can see being down there, being swept up in the moment, being swept up in the emotions, the excitement, and it's almost like as like I've had these experiences before in similar situations, like at concerts or something, right? Is that as if you're overcome by this wave of emotion, and it doesn't seem to be something that's being generated necessarily within you necessarily, but you're kind of tuning into it. You're kind of like a fish in the ocean, and you're being affected by this ocean of excitement you're swimming around in.
I was downtown Toronto with I don't know how many thousands of people. This was a couple years ago, a few years ago. It was the sixth game of the 2019 NBA championship. The Raptors were playing. We were outside, and again, there was thousands and thousands of people. There are probably more people outside than inside. And I remember when they missed that last 3-point shot to lose Game 6. Everyone was like so excited, like everyone was getting up there because the game was so close. And when they lost, when they missed that shot, it was like I could just feel the heaviness of everyone's emotions. Just like it was like a huge come down, and I just felt like everything was just weighing on you. And it was an amazing experience. Even though they lost that game, they went on to win, but it was a very unique experience.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with similar experiences too. I mean, I have one of my fond memories of my childhood is going to Maple Leaf Gardens with my dad to see the Maple Leafs play. And the first hockey game that he took me to go see was against the Detroit Red Wings.
Oh yeah,
back when Wendell Clark and Gilmore played for the Leafs, and Steve Yzerman was on the Red Wings.
Oh wow, yeah.
And classic rivalry, right? So
yes.
The game ended up going to overtime at the Gardens, and Wendell Clark passed. I think it was Gilmore assisted Wendell Clark, who scored the winning goal in overtime. And when that goal went in the net, it was just like electricity in the crowd, and I was experiencing chills. And it's something. It's somewhat ineffable to kind of put into words what the experience is like, but it definitely feels like I was dialed into something greater than myself there.
Mm-hmm.
If you wanted to call that a spirit, maybe we could. I get the same experience often when I'm reading a moving poem or find myself absorbed in a book, and these emotions are coming over me, these images are coming over me, and it's almost as if I am tapping into the collective memory of everyone else who's ever read this book before. So we may not necessarily say this is something supernatural in the sense that it's something above and beyond the natural, but we might say maybe it's something transpersonal, like it's something beyond the personal, but it's still natural. Maybe we can't currently explain it with our current science, but we maybe one day might be able to, be able to.
what comes to mind too is like those experiences you get on, psychedelics sometimes too. It's like those sort of emotions and feelings sort of washing over you, and some of them can just be like so powerful and seemingly beyond the ordinary, beyond sort of your natural experience, that it does have such an impact on you. Like it's something that you can carry forward and can change your life.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree. I think that, in an altered state, like being in a psychedelic state, as people report, it's a state in which boundaries dissolve, your subjective ego completely dissolves, and you're suddenly in tune with what seems to be, the mind of the cosmos to some degree. You're wired in with every other conscious being. You're wired in with you're wired into this memory. So it seems, images come to mind that are primitive in many respects, and filters break down. The barriers people typically put up, to experiencing the full range of human experience and feeling and so on and so forth will often come flooding in. It's like opening Pandora's box to some extent.
Yeah, I feel like that the language sort of melts away, like the sort of linguistic conceptual frameworks that we see the world in melt away, and I think that's why a lot of these experiences do, escape words. It escapes like our ability to articulate, and in that sense, there's really almost no way to describe it other than supernatural.
Yeah. I mean, I think to the extent that it's super, I think supernatural is a good word to use. So I mean, I think these are all good ideas we're bringing up here. I think these are things we could return to for sure. In the interest of just proceeding along with our discussion, maybe we can touch on some more key aspects of how the supernatural influences our ethical development during the Christmas season. And maybe before getting into that, actually, we've already gone over that to some extent. I guess the topic that I wanted to consider is what's the ontological status of the supernatural? So we've been talking about the supernatural, how it influences our ethical behavior, our ethical development during the holidays. And this is just more or less an interesting aside. We're talking about metaphysics now, not strictly ethics. But I'm just curious as to what you might think about what's the ontological reality of spirits and their impact on our personal transformation during the holidays, insofar as we think that there is a holiday spirit or some kind of intelligible phenomena that affects our ethical development, whether that's natural or supernatural. In this context, we're thinking about it in supernatural terms. Maybe you might consider them just to be natural, but Scrooge kind of himself has a skeptical attitude about the ontological status of the spirits that he encounters, to the extent that he doubts that they do exist. And when he encounters Marley's ghost, for example, he quips to Marley's ghost. He says, "You may just be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato. There's more of gravy than a grave in you, whatever you are." So he adds in a little pun there. But that's what he says initially, right? Like he's just straight up skeptic. Maybe he's materialist. He just thinks that the only things that exist are things that are material in nature, that can be quantified in some sense. But then Marley removes the bandage around his jaw and causes his lower jaw just to drop down. And Scrooge behaves as if the ghost were real when he sees the jaw drop. Like he just he's taken back in terror and dismay. And so if the ghost was just this, hallucination produced by his undigested dinner, then he wouldn't react that way. But he does. He reacts in a way as if it were real. And the ghost, solemnly exhorts Scrooge to achieve moral salvation at that point of the novella, and that he needs to give up his selfish ways and to cultivate a more benevolent character. And Scrooge's visitations by the three ghosts, moreover, helps to catalyze this moral transformation within Scrooge. So all of this is just, for me, it raises questions like, are these spirits merely chimeras of Scrooge's own mind, or are they real? And how can we account for Scrooge's moral transformation? If it's merely catalyzed by indigenous processes, those that are self-induced by his own consciousness, that might be the case, or these transformations might be catalyzed by endogenous processes, by forces outside of him, whether they're supernatural or whatever. But these are some things we could maybe think about. And so I think we've talked about this to an extent already. Maybe we can talk about maybe a little more explicitly, and then maybe we can wrap up our conversation for the evening and get back into further discussion of how the natural influences affect our moral development over the holidays. So do you have any thoughts that come to mind when thinking about the reality of the spirits, either as they're portrayed in Dickens' story, or how other people might conceptualize them during the Christmas season?
I'm a little bit undecided on how important it is for these things to be real or not, or whether or not they're real. I think in my own experience, the ontology isn't so important. When I have sort of an experience, akin to one of these, for me, it's about the meaning. So, whether or not the ghost is real, or, a fever dream or whatever, what are you going to do with the information presented to you, by the ghost or by the dream? It might be important for some people, right? If some people, don't believe in ghosts or whatever, and that's the way they perceive the experience, well, the experience wasn't real, so what does it matter? If you're a hard-nosed realist, or a materialist or something like that. But for me, it's kind of irrelevant whether it's a dream, whether it's a drug-induced, psychosis or experience. It's more or less the information that's contained within it that's important to consider. So, if I would have to, have an opinion on the ontology, I would say that the spirits, aren't real insofar as they're spirits in the sort of generic way that they're conceived in literature or whatever. But if we take more like a abstract point of view, or more of a naturalistic point of view, which we'll get into later, I'd say that they're real. They're just maybe not spirits. They're, some sort of collective consciousness or reflection, or some altered state of consciousness, or something like that.
That's an interesting take on it. I can definitely sympathize with that view. Ultimately, I think at this point, I'm open to there being a possibility of there being a supernatural. I'm more or less at this point on board with what you were saying about the practical significance of these encounters and experiences with so-called supernatural, and how that impacts our growth as ethical beings. And I think it's the message and the information that those experiences deliver to us makes a practical difference in our lives. And that's valuable and meaningful from a pragmatic point of view. And this kind of brings to mind William James and the varieties of religious experience. You might have read it. I'm not sure.
I'm familiar with it. I can't say I've read the whole thing, but I'm definitely familiar with it. It's kind of what was in my mind there.
Right. Yeah, I've read through a bit of it, and he talks about how we shouldn't discount mystical experiences, how we shouldn't discount non-ordinary experiences. Maybe experiences with the transcendental, something that seems to be something we're connected with, but something that is also seems to be not us, in our narrow sense of the term, but this larger life force or consciousness that we're a part of. And he talks about how there's, a adaptive or like an evolutionary value in believing in things like supernatural events or in a lot of what we consider supernatural or religious, to the extent that we have we believe, we believe in the we believe in the values that these religions uphold. For example, these values can be helpful to us, as far as our ethical development goes, and so it's this activity of belief, not so much the ontological question, but how belief in whatever it is, the supernatural, belief in yourself, or whatever, the significance of belief upon our health, upon our functioning is what's important, not necessarily the existence of the supernatural. If we believe that the supernatural exists and that belief is useful to us for our survival, for our eudaimonic and our hedonic well-being, then to that extent, it's at least useful to think that they're real. And to the extent that something is useful, it can also be true for taking more of a pragmatic approach to knowledge. And so yeah, I mean, that's maybe a more moderate way of thinking about it. We're not going out on a limb and saying that the spirits themselves are literally real, but we're saying that there's great advantage in believing that they're real. And that's the significant part of it. So, and that's what contributes to our ethical and moral development, maybe, is that belief that they're real, not necessarily that they are real. So maybe I'll just leave it at that for my part. If you have any other things you wanted to bring into the discussion before we wrap up, feel free.
No, I think that was good. Yeah. I think the part that you said about it's not so important that they are real, but that we believe that they are, or that they are in some sense the experience is real. We're at least able to take something from it and allow ourselves to grow and to further ourselves towards self-actualization and well-being. So yeah, I think that was a really good summary.
Great. Okay, well, I think we've touched on some key and interesting issues here. We've talked about our initial impressions of what the meaning of the Christmas and the holidays more generally is, and we seem to be, really at least seem to minimally agree that the meaning is, in some sense, ethical and moral in nature. And we've kind of unpacked what this means in terms of how Christmas provides us with the context to strive to achieve happiness and to maintain our happiness and to strengthen our happiness, but also to support the well-being of others, to support other people's eudaimonic and hedonic well-being. And we've kind of just left off talking about the extent to which various influences come into play insofar as they help us to achieve well-being in that broad sense and to help us to support well-being in that broad sense. And we looked at the supernatural and how that might influence us. And so in the coming conversation, we can kind of pick up the thread and focus on the natural and contrast and supernatural, how natural influences might affect this change and might affect this development over the holidays. So we'll just leave it at that. And I hope that the conversation so far has stimulated some interesting thoughts in the listeners. And we will return to where we left off in our coming exploration. So stay tuned. Bye-bye for now.